Okay, so we're gathered for another sculpture forum, and we gathered this time in the gallery of the New York Studio School, where we've been looking at an exhibition of work by Jim Condron. And I'm delighted to be with my usual colleagues, Jock and Brandt, Junceau, and especially delighted on this occasion to have with us the distinguished sculptor, William Tucker. Thank you very much, Bill, for joining us.
I'm glad to.
So this exhibition, Jim Condron is I guess an artist, sculptor, who gathers things from his friends and people he knows and makes something out of them. And I'm not at all sure what to make out of what he's made out of the things he's collected. I mean, I just report a vague discomfort, although I think, you know, that the initial impression is of some kind of, you know, playful encounter with another person's life. You know, I think I have more to say, but I'm going to open it up. Jock.
Well, I understand your discomfort. We're all sort of older gentlemen here, and this is not the kind of sculpture that I sort of grew up with. But it is common today, or this kind of thing. The scrappy, garbagey kind of materials, the unsculptural materials, the rejection of things you might have learned in art school, the sense in which what comes with art school, with an understanding of history, is sort of confusion that I think a lot of young people are rejecting now, and sort of shifting the emphasis away from art to life. And that can result in sort of confusion. And that is disconcerting, but I think it's a big question. Or I'm interested in the show because it's sort of explicit about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure my discomfort is so much about the, you know, the rejection of a kind of formal language of traditional sculptural concerns. It's something else, and having to do with the kind of implicit kind of invitation to. I mean, I found it necessary to read the labels, and that, first of all, can like seem like, why is it necessary? Because the people that these things have been collected from, you know, there's a kind of almost kind of name dropping kind of experience, and as if you're invited to engage with this person's intimate life in some way. Intimate, maybe the wrong word, but you know, the kind of sense of you're getting a I don't know what, but a look at something that's, you know, not necessarily how the person would present themselves. Brandt.
It's a funny thing, although they're composed, I mean, they're all titled after the subject and this person's things. It doesn't have a kind of an intimate feeling of particular people or things that have a very special and peculiar value to them. It feels like it could have been another selection, and he would have composed that as readily, and the kind of origin of the elements is not so important.
There are two here that I really strongly like, and they're the one that's called Grace Hardigan's thing, and the one up here, which is the kind of modified chair, or it's a complete chair.
John Helker's.
John Helker. Grace Hardigan's, well, Grace Hardigan is a name, obviously, I know, and her paintings I know, and so there was a connection there, and there's a kind of boldness about that one, and a sort of sense of completeness about it that I respond to. But the chair I'm disappointed with because it's on this kind of bracket, this kind of awkwardly welded bracket, that it's not part of the chair. I mean, I feel that he could have modified that construction of the chair so that the whole thing came off the wall as a complete unit, not as a kind of museum piece. I mean, I think this is maybe that's what you're talking about with the labels and everything, and the kind of personal aspect of it.
Well, you touch on an issue that's kind of been I haven't quite come to terms with, which is that there's this gathering of material from somebody's studio or living room or wherever, and presumably the people he gathers things from are, happy for him to have them. But then he comes back to his studio with this collection of stuff and has to put it together somehow. And often there is a kind of a hidden structure that is, really like the thing that's holding that chair up, which is not hidden, but sometimes it's more hidden. But it seems irrelevant. It did not please me. To have this gathering of various objects, but then them being attached to the wall or supported in some way by some structure that is not part of the material that is being gathered together.
Well, I think Balzac at some point, the 19th century French novelist, said something about being able to write a whole novel based on the kinds of things that Jim started with, stuff in a person's pocket, stuff left over at a cafe table or something like that. So that impulse isn't common, or at least there's a history of that in the context of literature, narrative, but is it sort of appropriate for sculpture, and is it, to bring that to sculpture is not something that leaves me at ease. But the other thing, looking at the whole place, at all of the work and not one by one, for some reason I thought of Raphael, and the simplicity and sort of sweetness of the work in general. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, that is a very surprising kind of association to me. I mean, the arrangements of the collected things in each case is quite different, and they vary a good deal. But my overall sense of the kind of flavor, the kind of content of what it is I'm experiencing is more a kind of sadness, a kind of
Do you say sadness?
sadness,
Yeah.
yes, a kind of things that have been rejected, lost, forgotten, abandoned, and yet often they seem to present themselves as if they're kind of joyful, but they're not at all. So that kind of colorful, there's a lot of color, that kind of colorful, thrown together, lighthearted, seems to me to be a kind of, I feel it as a kind of, putting a pretty face on something that's really quite, not happy.
I didn't catch that. So it's interesting that you bring that up.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm aware of as Jock says, like in relation to Raphael, there's a certain kind of sweet temper, this artist's character, and each piece seems to be affectionate. I mean, I just have to look and think again to see that kind of elegiac thing.
Say some more.
The pieces that I like best are the ones that are most formal. And it seems like they're almost casually formal. Like it's not a real drive for him, but occasionally he falls into it and it works for him. And that vertical one around the corner, I think it's Mickey Drexler. That's this kind of column.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That very simple scheme reminded me of the Dürer projected monument to the end of the peasant rebellion. It's a kind of stack of disparate things. I could almost wish it were monochrome, like a Twombly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That if that sort of vertical formal unity were, like just kind of locked in by it all being all white.
Well, I don't come back to what Jock was saying. I don't think there's anything wrong with stuff picked up on the street. I mean, the artist that I would connect this with really more than anyone else is Schwitters, But I think these pieces might be, coming to what Garth was saying, they might be memorials. And I guess I never knew John Hellico, but this would seem to be a kind of, this is his actual chair. And that was sort of straightforward, but then I don't know what all the boxes are.
I think they're cigarette boxes, aren't they? So he must have been a heavy smoker.
Cigarettes. Oh,
I think so.
Yeah, I like that piece of all of them. I also like this piece, and I don't know anything about that artist, but I very much like the way that piece is, the way it relates to the wall, and I totally get that it's about a painter, and the fact that it is a relief, but it's also works very well as a painting. I mean, but the degree of depth is really very slight. And you get immediately because of the brushes and the rollers, and then there's the kind of funky cast hand. I mean, but everything is kind of close to the wall, but that closeness to the wall is kind of, it's uncertain exactly where it lies in relation to the wall.
Yeah, I like that piece too, although I'm bothered by the hand in that piece, the white plaster cast hand. which I think is out of place. I mean, I'm not sure that there should be a hand there or not, but I wouldn't have put it dead center like that, where it is. I would have put it somewhere else. Anyway, it's a minor thing. Yeah, so I mean, there are pieces that I respond to more strongly and seem to enjoy more than others.
I would think that the person is really trying to create portraits. I mean, I think the seriousness of the project is not, just collections of things, curiosities. I think, to give him credit, he is trying to create a portrait of the person. So
yeah, that's a very interesting, way to approach them, I think, and maybe the best way to approach them. Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go on about portraits. So.
Well, yeah, yes, I know. But I mean, many of the people, since Jim Condron was a student at the studio school here at some point, and at least in my case, I know some of the people that he's collected things from, some better than others. But in the cases of the people who I know fairly well, and I look at the object, the sculpture that has resulted from collecting things from, say, Bruce Gagne, I mean, I can recognize the objects that have been collected as things that a traditional sculptor would have in his studio. But I don't understand, the way in which that whole thing has been put together. It doesn't feel to me, it doesn't feel to me like Bruce.
Yeah, it's just a list. It doesn't come together as a portrait. It's just sort of documentary. It's not a real complete story.
That's my feeling, yeah, but I mean, that may not be the case with all of the work. I mean, some of the one that Bill likes, that chair, that would seem to me to have much more potential to be, I don't know the artist or whoever it was, a writer, I think, is it? But that seems to have a kind of coherence and a compactness. Again, I agree with Bill. I wish it were attached to the wall by itself and not by this thing poking out underneath it. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. Overall, it's very lively and energetic and engages one. I mean, but it's, I don't know what my discomfort is. It's as if I'm being nosy. I feel I'm being nosy.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a public statement about this artist's private relationship, connection with the artist who he's chosen to make a portrait of. And to me, I mean, I'm very much involved with portraits, and the fact that a portrait has got a portrait you're making public, a public statement about an individual and who you, and whether you're commissioned to do it or you're doing it because you want to do it. you have a relationship with the sitter. It seems to me that a portrait, you know, if you think of it in a kind of general kind of way, a whole lot of modern art is self-portrait. And whether explicitly or implicitly, that's what it is, you know. But to make a portrait of an individual person, you want to get a sense of the individuality of that person, and I think seriously that's what he's trying to do. And I think the Glenn Goldberg person is Glenn Goldberg is someone I know, and his art is, I like a lot of his art, but it's all over the place. And I think this is a pretty good representation of it. But I don't think it's a great piece of sculpture, you know? So there's so much involved in this.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just going to, you know, to some extent, you were saying, Bill, that a lot of modern art can be seen as self-portraits. And I was wondering, when I heard you say that, I was wondering, we've been talking about these things as, or you've been talking about these things as portraits, but they're not, or are they? Self-portraits as well as portraits of the persons from whom things have been collected? Or are they portraits of the relationship between the artist and the sitter?
Well, isn't that what a good portrait is?
I'd have to think about that.
Well,
It reminds me that the thing that I miss here, a gap that I find in here is likeness. I don't sense that between the subject and
Did you say likeness or lightness?
no likeness.
Likeness.
I think he was a painter, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's...
So there's a lot more things that can be easily accommodated in a painting.
Yeah, well...
And
sure.
so in a way, this kind of accumulation aspect of this is perfectly acceptable from the point of view of a painting, you know? You know, I mean, you would have a portrait. I was looking at a wonderful portrait of a peasant or a gardener on his family estate by Cézanne. I was looking at it in the Metropolitan the other day, and there are a lot of things in it, as well as the guy, the man sitting there.
Right.
The most extraordinary thing about it is actually the size of his hand. His hand is kind of, one hand is folded over the other in his lap, and his hand is absolutely huge. It's as big as his head.
Yeah.
But then there are also other things around that, because of where he's sitting against a wall, and there seems to be a kind of corridor leading off behind it, and then everything is slightly misaligned because it's Cézanne, you know.
Yeah.
And the chair that he's sitting on, that is a very important part of the structure of the painting, you know. So it's all part of a portrait. It's a perfectly recognizable individual.
Yeah, but it's all within a rectangle.
Yes.
That sort of simple thing, it's contained. You know, every single thing is contained and in a complete work of art.
In a painting, yes, in a painting, yes.
Well, right.
And so
But
what we're talking about here are, for the most part, reliefs rather than freestanding sculpture. I guess the one of Graham is the only one I can see from here anyhow. It's a freestanding sculpture.
Yeah.
Well, they're not reliefs in the traditional sense. They're objects that are
Objects on the wall.
attached to the wall, in some way, or on a shelf, or a shelf is part of the object in some cases.
But
So that, I mean, there's too often, often there is a kind of quality of casualness, which I think can sometimes be charming, and welcoming, but often it just is not, and seems to be carelessness. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say.
well, it's not, because actually, when I remember teaching here a long time ago, that it was very hard to make students who came in to do sculpture here. It was very hard to make a distinction between what was simply careless, right? Not just casual, but just careless, and the randomness that came from some sense of, that they were thinking about the object or responding to the object.
Yeah.
Can I come back to portraits?
Please, please.
Because if we think of these as portraits, I think he does. I mean, I think he must do, because why else give them the name of the owner of these things? That they are portraits of Grace Artigan and the other, and Glenn Goldberg and the other people.
Well, they could also be tributes or something of that kind, couldn't they? I mean, they don't have to be portraits. They could be a kind of tributes, a kind of letters, communications of some kind.
Trophies. Trophies.
Trophy.
Selfies?
Trophies. Yeah.
Trophies.
I mean,
No, but why is it that they're a tribute, okay, but not trophies, unless you feel that he's captured these people, hunted them down, and hung their heads on the wall.
Yeah, but that disturbing dimension, or that's a disturbing dimension of the sort of general sense of the word portrait.
that touches on my sense of discomfort, though, I think, that we're not quite sure where it's coming from or how to pin it down, but it is very real to me that there's just, I'm experiencing something that is like,
Is it that you're disturbed by the idea that the artist has a private relationship with these individuals that he's kind of is
exploiting?
keeping secret, and that, there's a kind of sense of prying when you look into that person's things, as though...
Yes, something like that. Although, I mean, in general, I should say that feeling discomfort in engaging somebody else's work is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily, a critical thing. It is just a feeling that I have that I need to register and figure out what it's coming from. But yeah, I mean, Bill, it's in that area, I think, in the sense that I'm being invited into a relationship that I'm not part of. I'm being invited to have a relationship with somebody that I don't know, or I do know, and this isn't my relation. I don't know. It's complicated, but it.
I wish I had more of that feeling. But I don't
Say some more.
find
Say more of what feeling?
more of the feeling that maybe there's something here that I shouldn't know about, or which would suppose that there was that kind of depth of connection and a sort of like intimate connection between the subject and the artist. But I don't find them emotionally acute enough to be, disappointed or disturbed.
But you're charmed by them, really.
This is different from, I don't know, Jason Rhodes or a lot of contemporary work in which there's a very dark side, and the darkness sort of asserts itself. Jim doesn't go there.
I don't get the connection with Rachael. I mean, when I think of Rachael, I think of a well-ordered world,
Right, and just like one thing on top of another thing. That way of doing things. And here we've got one thing beside another thing. That simple ordering, with Raphael, you get a complexity that isn't here. But that the impulses are, I'm able to.
Why Raphael? And why you choose any other Renaissance artist? I don't get that.
Sweetness.
I get that. There's a sweetness in his temperament.
Yeah.
It's affectionate and encouraging, and he likes his subjects. He admires them. He thinks well of them. He needs to share his sense of them with others. I don't see a Raphael connection beyond that, but I see that clearly. It's a temperament thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about the individual, thinking about the individual things as portraits, and about the relationship of the artist to the sitter or the subject, and the private nature of that, and the secret nature in a way, and the whole business of prying and that kind of thing. That's where I'm coming from as far as this is concerned. But it recalls a discussion that took place when you guys I was the subject or object of a sculpture forum, and there was this whole long thing between you and Jock.
Yeah, a long email exchange.
Oh, it was an email exchange?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it was about, because to explain to you that you're not privy to this.
I think you were privy to it. No, you were privy to it.
This was, they came to my studio and, or maybe it was just, did Garth? I think it was just Maud
came to your studio and did a studio thing, which was...
But she interviewed me,
Yeah.
right.
And you were working on a piece called a head.
It was called Gracchus.
Gracchus.
And it was based on a story of Kafka's.
Yeah.
Called The Hunter Gracchus.
Yeah.
And that really, it was during the COVID or about that, I was really very much concerned with this idea of this story about an individual who was hunting in the forest and then fell over a cliff or something like that, and but he didn't die, and so he is then transported about the world like the Flying Dutchman. And so he arrives at this, in a barge at the city of Riva, and is escorted up to the, he's kind of received very formally by the mayor, and he's lying in the barge. And it's not clear if he speaks, but it's really not clear if he's alive or dead. He's somewhere in a state between life and death. And, you know, he introduces himself by telling his story about how he was out hunting and he fell down. And he fell down, and then he fell down the cliff, and then he goes, basically has been traveling around the world ever since in this kind of in-between state. And this seemed like very much like what I felt during COVID. And I mean, I guess I was just carried away by it, but that was what I felt I was trying to get at. And this is what was the subject of the sculpture which was a head, right, that I was working on. And I was trying, and so you and Garth got into this extended email exchange about
object and image.
Yes, yeah. And I think it sort of connects.
Well, I was just picking up on that. Do you think that are you suggesting, implying that these things that we're engaging here are in some way in that in-between state between alive and dead, in terms of portraits, or in terms of what? I mean, I could go there. I mean, that would make sense to me, that somehow that these things are on the one hand potential portraits, on the other hand they are kind of memorabilia, they are memorials, they are tributes, all of that. And so the status of the sitter, as it were, the person from whom these things have been collected, is ambiguous. You know, I mean, some of the people who he's collected things from presumably were alive when he collected them, but are now no longer alive. And some of them are still very much alive. And that you know, that hadn't occurred to me, that might be something to think about. So they are not just portraits. They're certainly more than that, or something other than that.
Well, portraits are more than that. More than just pictures of people's faces. You know.
The things that you mentioned are each good vehicles toward portraiture, or in modern times have become, you know, frequent, maybe is not the word, but you know, accessible means of portraiture. I mean, like that David Smith table with the kind of the blazing star on it, the bent tools. You know, I mean, that's self-portraiture.
That connects.
No image of self.
Yeah, but that also connects. Collection of tools.
Yeah. I
mean, that is a self-portrait and very comparable to what's happening in its intention. Yeah.
Yeah. I think artist I keep thinking of is Cornell.
Yeah.
Where you don't see a face per se, but you very often have a strong sense of person and likeness.
What about narrative? I mean, do these things contain a narrative? I mean, that thing on the far wall, that rope with things attached to it, you know, could be read as some kind of storyline. Maybe there is some kind of. Is there an implicit narrative in these things?
Well, one way that I like this little relief is I feel like the formal elements are in action, that they're crunching together in an active way that feels like kind of story. And it could be, you know, like somehow the forces inside the subject acting out on the wall. And I have that feeling from the kind of columnar piece on the wall, that the, I forget what it is, it's like clothing between the barrels is
mostly clothing,
you know, squishing from between them. I like them most when I feel like the formal elements are sort of behaving as themselves.
This one also has the quality, to me, has the quality of being a book, you know, unfolding like that, in the sense of the thinness and fragility of the paper, pages. There is a lot to think about here.
Yeah, right. It jumbles things up, but it doesn't bring everything together, is, I guess, my response.
Actually, Jock, jumble is a good word. And when you came out with lists, that was also kind of right on. And for me, I wish that the lists were more like a sonnet, or like, and the jumble was more like a face.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was addressing the subject like one-to-one, as you do with a, you know, more conventional portrait.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's you know, that I often have this experience of wanting to edit things, wanting to edit, and that's, you know, leave me alone in here, and I would edit this work. I mean, really severely. You know, to try and get at some kind of essence, which I think is not necessarily what Jim Condron is about.
Yeah, and to some extent, he's rejecting that editing process, or at least I feel he doesn't trust it.
But is he trying to get at what is essential in some sense?
Yeah, he's trying to figure out what essential means, right? There it is.
Well, essential is what you can't do without.
Well, yeah.
Or it takes a kind of miscellany for essence.
Yeah.
Editing is, I've discovered through doing a lot of writing in recent years, how important editing is. And you really, you have to have an editor. And maybe your role is to be an editor for young sculptors like this guy.
Well, yeah, that's the sense in which Sculpture Forum is that kind of thing.
Well, anyway, I think we agree that there's a lot to think about here, a lot to ponder and consider. That it isn't by any means straightforward, and it's to me at least annoying and engaging, slightly discomforting, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I guess I'm glad to have seen it and engaged with it. Those are my last words. Anybody else?
They work for me.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jock. Thank you, Brandt. All right, now you can show what you really think.
Well, I wanted to go on about portraits.
Please do.